It's pretentious foppery. There were just words on paper and I don't really understand why they were there. This is not good. This is a book. And the plot reads as if he accidentally dropped the manuscript for his novel before publishing it and hastily put it back together randomly, hoping that nobody would notice. And to be fair to him, I don't think anybody's called him on it yet. I don't know why I make this video every year. I mean, it gets a lot of views, but every time I lose subs because I get carried away insulting some really, really terrible piece of literature and I always offend somebody. Yet I'm doing it again. Hi, my name's Scott. Welcome to Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and these are the worst books I read in the year 2022. And I think it's important to discuss bad books as passionately as we discuss good ones, because we're saving other readers time and money. We're opening up space for them to read better books. Or, if you think my opinions are a little bit backwards, in which case, Sean, Shelley, Brian, you can treat this video as a list of recommendations. I've got 16 books you should avoid, and I've even finished 12 of them, the other 4 being DNFs that made an impression. Now, if I'm being strict, this probably isn't the 16 worst books I've read all year. It just includes some books that I found really disappointing or overhyped. And that's where we're starting, with Celest Ng's Our Missing Hearts. If this was written by a debut author, it would have been a below average and forgettable dystopian. But it was written by Celest Ng, and this was really disappointing. You know when you find a new author you really like, and then you go through their back catalogue, and it's just not as good as their most recent work. So you just put that down to the author developing with time and practice. This is like the exact opposite of that. It's like Ng is practicing getting shitter. And I don't know if many other readers have this issue with dystopian, but I'm sure you all do. Often the world is just so much more interesting than either the characters or the plot, which leads you to be really interested at the beginning of the novel, but you start to get bored halfway through the novel when you realise there's a plot to resolve. Celest Ng has definitely fallen into that pitfall with this dystopian novel, but the only problem is that the world isn't that imaginative or that great to begin with. But at least this novel hasn't been overhyped by booktube, which is a lot more than I can say about Lauren Groff's novel The Matrix. To be fair, Groff's writing is actually beautiful, and she's writing historical fiction about lesbian nuns in the 12th century, focusing on Eleanor Aquitaine, who I believe, and unverified historical fact that may or may not be made up, is the only woman to have been queen of both England and France. So this sounds amazing, and Groff is very clearly skillful at sentence construction. But she wouldn't know what a character or a plot was if it slapped her in the face with a herring. Granted, I don't think I'd know too much if something slapped me in the face with a herring, because that's ridiculous. This book was really boring. It relies on beautiful prose to carry it through. It doesn't allow you to invest in the characters. It doesn't really discuss their desires. Lesbian nuns is an interesting idea on its own, and I could have used a bit more conflict or fulfillment or anything at that level, but the relationships in this novel were written at a very biblical level of detail. That is, and Enoch begat Methuselah. Celest Ng and Lauren Groff are the only 2 authors on this list who I think, fair enough, I'll give you another shot. I'll read your books again. You're not actually bad authors, you've written bad books. And to be honest, I'm not sure about the next author either, because Mona Ashi's book, Somebody Loves You, makes this list by virtue of it being absolutely forgettable. Not only can't I tell you anything about this book now, but that was the case when I had recently finished this novel and wanted to include it in my monthly wrap. Was this book bad? I don't know. I was hoping somebody in the comments might be able to fill me in, because I was legit surprised to find that I had read this book. This year I have DNF'd an incredible number of books, just shy of 100. And while I'm happy to DNF a book at any stage of my reading, most of the time it happens somewhere between the 20 and the 50% mark of the novel. Enough time for me to get a feel for the book, but without giving the book a chance to get too terrible. However, there's a few times where my DNFing has been really dramatic, and Gone Girls by Gillian Flynn is one of those books. DNF'd at the 95% mark. Maybe I should credit Flynn for getting me all the way through to 95% before I gave up. Characters doing horribly evil things to each other is my cup of tea, but I want detailed, internalized thoughts and emotion, and Flynn really views these things as completely unnecessary. In fact, I think she even views her two-dimensional characters as having one dimension too many. They're simply pawns for her plot. The book is very popular, and I'm sure a few people will disagree with me about it. So let me say that if plot is the primary reason you read a novel, and you have no other concerns about literally any other aspect of literature, then this is an excellent book. Everybody else, please remember to recycle. Another book I DNF'd, and I know that this will upset some people, is the final revival of Opal and Nev by Dawnie Walton. Not only did this book fail to set up any sort of conflict, any hook, any reason to continue reading, it changed perspectives way too frequently. Winter in Soko has a beautiful cover. Unfortunately, that's the most interesting thing about the novel. A book so boring that the most exciting thing to happen was literally turning the page. However, that's still slightly more interesting than Jhumpa Lahiri's novel Whereabouts. As in, whereabouts can I incinerate this hideous waste of paper? It doesn't even have a nice cover. Lahiri's reputation as a big-name author might be the reason a publisher took a chance on it and didn't reject the novel, which honestly makes me think less of publishers than I do about the author. Another author who publishers really need to learn how to say no to is Stephen King, and his short story, Quitters Inc., was both predictable and had the plot leading the characters. The characters in this book could not have even been partially formed in King's head. A lot of people have said I'm wrong to judge King on this, but it is just so clear to me that King is never going to make characters do any of the things that I value in a book that I enjoy reading. He's never going to write characters with detailed all range of emotion. An author who can actually write really good emotions in her characters is Bryn Greenwood, and her novel All the Ugly and Wonderful Things is actually really well written. It's just that she's advocating for children who like to be groomed and legitimately love their abuser. What the actual fuck, Bryn Greenwood? What the actual fuck? For me, books like this are the reason book banning is not an open and shut case. Legit, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not trying to shock you for a laugh. This book is a danger to children. And these ideas won't go away once they're defeated in some sort of debate that is magically going to encompass the entire world. These ideas have been well and truly defeated many times. We need literature that shows parents and teachers how to prevent this happening to children in their care, not books that normalise child abuse. This book will cause more children to be raped and molested. And all that said, it's actually really, really well done and gives you a stunning amount of insight into Greenwood's own past and the influences of trauma on her current life. Please, if you do actually read this book, which, I mean, why? But if you do actually read this book, please try to empathise with the author and what she must have gone through so that she sees relationships like the ones that Wavy and Callan had as a positive relationship. This book intentionally manipulates your emotions to get you to support something truly horrible. And honestly, it would have been a 5-star read if the ideas in it weren't so repugnant. It is a vomit-worthy, dangerous book, and I have a whole video explaining why this book is paedophile apologetica, and I compare it and contrast it to novels that discuss the same issue, such as Lolita and My Dark Vanessa, which are much better novels on this topic for a variety of reasons, especially My Dark Vanessa. There are 6 books left, and they all have something in common, and we can just put away that nasty last issue and relax. I'm just going to rant about some really terrible books. The commonality between these books should become clear in a minute. Washington Black by Essie Adjidjan. The story of a black slave who suffers from abandonment issues after his latest master, the only kind one he's ever had, leaves him in Canada. What? There is something to do with a cloud cutter or a hot air balloon in this novel too, but ultimately this is a book that starts with a bang and gets you thinking that it's going to be amazing. But then precious little occurs and it slowly slows down until the pacing literally comes to a stop and you are bored out of your mind. It is devoid of characters, emotions, introspection, or really any of the things that you can write about. There were just words on paper and I don't really understand why they were there. This novel was shortlisted for the 2018 Booker Prize, and Essie Adjidjan has been named head judge for the 2023 Booker Prize. So let's hope I agree with her taste in books much more than I agree with her novels. An Island by Karen Jennings surprised a lot of people when it was longlisted for the 2021 Booker Prize. This was a book without anything interesting. There was absolutely nothing to hold my attention. It was a book that was actually doing quite a bit thematically, but it was so boring that I couldn't be bothered placing the bits together to understand what was going on. It wasn't that this book went over my head, it's that I literally couldn't be bothered to look at the stuff above my head and go, oh, immigration. This is a perfect example of letting your ideas get in the way of your storytelling. I DNF'd this book about a third of the way in. Another book I DNF'd that also let its themes get in the way of storytelling was Trust by Hernan Diaz. But in this case, it was a simple one-trick novel that pulled something really quite obvious. A father and a child are driving a car when it hits the ice and skids off the road, killing the father instantly. The son is rushed to the hospital and needs surgery to save his life. And when he gets there, the doctor on call says, I'm a brilliant investment banker. Pretend that I'm skillful at my job and don't exploit people. Empathize with me. I'm a good guy. This book is white feminism on paper. It's not clever. It's very American Psycho-esque without the violence. It's dull and poorly written. And to be fair to Diaz, I actually think he was intentionally dull and poorly written, which puts it one step above Ashton Ellis's novel at least. The praise for this book is frankly ridiculous. And it draws comparison to how the art world reacts to Rothko. This book is just one of the reasons why this year's Booker longlist was so bad. But seriously, we need to stop giving mediocre feminism cookies. Any action is not good enough when you know what the better action is. Seriously, this is not feminist. This is not good. This is a shit book. The Inheritance of Loss, Kiran Desai, is a red-hot mess. A book of horrible things told at a breakneck pace without introspection, character development, or emotion. Desai either needs to give herself another 300 more pages for all the events of this novel, or cut out half of them completely. She needs to adequately explain things. She needs to tell me about the effects they have on her characters. This book was shortlisted for the 2007 Women's Prize and it won the 2006 Booker Prize, which is proof in itself that the quality of literature has drastically improved in the last 15 years. I have 2 books left to talk about, and I've already produced a video at the halfway point of this year which declared Booth by Karen Joy Fowler as the worst book I have read all year. Spanning nearly 500 pages, Booth reads more like it's 1500, and it tells the story of John Wilkes Booth. But it doesn't want to glorify him, so Fowler decenters him from the story, but fails to give her story an alternative focus. In her author notes at the end, Fowler describes how she wanted to show the effects of having a killer in the family on that family. Yet she spent 450 pages introducing the characters at a painstakingly slow pace, and then rushes over what she says the point of her novel is in little more than a paragraph per character. Fowler decides she wants to include a discussion about racism, and she does, but she neglects to include a single black character in her novel. In a novel which is about a war fought over slavery of black people. Instead, Fowler shows us the racist attitudes that some people had at the time and constantly goes to length to tell you that those opinions are repugnant. I mean, of course they are, but don't show me, tell me. All that was needed was a single black character. This really is one of the most inept novels I have ever read, and I have no idea on what grounds it could have possibly been longlisted for this year's Booker Prize. The very existence of a book like this makes me seriously doubt the publishing process. It's certainly not producing good quality books. I mean, I really think the role of a good editor should be to give negative feedback to the author, to give critiques to the author so that the author can improve their books. It's clear that this just hasn't happened to Karen Joy Fowler in this novel. When I reveal what the last book is on this list, I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, but you just didn't understand all of this, or you need to just know British mythology. And to those people I say, yeah, well, explain the book to me then, because I've watched several reviews and nobody has said anything that I can call remotely insightful or enlightening. Nobody has explained what I don't understand about Treacle Walker. And I think it's a bit demeaning to assume that I don't have a knowledge of the mythology and the culture of literally the second most influential country on the planet today. So let me say this. Treacle Walker is utter, meaningless nonsense. And I'm sure I missed at least half the references. Not necessarily because I'm missing knowledge, although maybe, but because I was so bored. I couldn't have cared less. This book was disengaging. And let me say this, that when a woman writes a novel without men in it, it's labelled dystopian. But when men do it, it's shortlisted for the Booker Prize. And that in itself should give you an idea of just how narrow the scope Garner is writing for. And Alan Garner can't even write a pretty sentence. He certainly can't write characters, and the plot reads as if he accidentally dropped the manuscript for his novel before publishing it, and hastily put it back together randomly, hoping that nobody would notice. And to be fair to him, I don't think anybody's called him on it yet. And as for the mythology, let me tell you this, it doesn't add anything to the book. It's just an author polishing his nether regions, listing everything he knows. Do you know what, Alan? I can read Wikipedia too. It's pretentious foppery. It's self-indulgent. It's a book that's saying, look, I'm smart. It is the antithesis of good literature. It's a writing exercise that with a lot of editing may have been turned into a readable text. It's unpolished, and the praise for this book, the shortlisting of this book on the Booker Prize, it makes me angry because this book is intentionally inaccessible. And when you can assess it, when you can assess what's going on, it doesn't make it better. Look, I could include weird facts in my review too. Hey, did you know Jesus had a sister? Yeah, I once watched a documentary. And that random factoid added nothing to this review. If you liked Treacle Walker, then we fundamentally disagree about what a good book is. This book is not thought-provoking, nor is it emotionally rich. It is not entertaining. The plot doesn't capture the attention. It doesn't have nice prose, and its dreamscape setting is boring. Nobody cares what a donkey stone is. It's naff, boring, and a frankly childish attempt at writing Joyce-esque literature. It is self-indulgent nonsense. Treacle Walker probably isn't the worst book I've read all year, but it is the book that I hated the most. It is the book whose existence made me angry. It belongs in the class of literature that I cannot stand. And the reviewers out there who loved it and said that people don't understand it have not been able to demonstrate what they understood about it themselves to make it better. And I'm going to assert that the only reason that this book gets any love from anybody at all is hubris. Whoa, I needed to get that out. Thank you, BookTube, for listening to me. Oh, I feel like I can be a better person now. It feels like after you've just I feel lighter. I'm going to edit that out. I think that is not something I should be saying on my videos. Well, there you have it. 16 books to avoid. I hope to have kept your wallet fuller and your TBR bearer with this video. Please don't unsubscribe from me. I promise in my next video I will say nothing but nice things about books. Bye bye.